Hello everyone, and in this video we're going to be looking at this scene that I made here, this desert scene, and I'm going to be going over my GAEA process and then my Cinema 4D process and just looking at how I made certain things, how I made the material, for example, how I did the scattering, and just in general how I built the scene and put it all together. This is not going to be a time lapse, but it's going to be more of me explaining some of the tricks and some of the stuff that I used and something that goes behind some of the stuff that goes behind making something like this. So hopefully if you're making a similar scene, this video helps you out a bit to like plan everything and, you know, figure out how to do certain things the best way or the way that I do them. So this whole process started out here in GAEA. We have this hero section, this hero landscape. How I made this landscape is super simple. For everyone who doesn't know, GAEA is a terrain generation tool, similar to World Creator, or if you're using Houdini, similar to using Houdini for terrain generation. I just find it the simplest to use, and I find that the results are very good, and I just prefer it over the other options I have. So, how this was made. I took a Dune C, cranked up a lot of settings. I took a plate, mostly similar to the base settings, and then I combined them. What it did, actually it did nothing. In the grand scheme of things, this Dune C could not have been used, and I could just use the plates. But while testing this out, I just decided to put them together, and I never put them apart. But anyway, from here you can combine them, or you can combine the dunes or whatever you feel like art directing, and whatever you feel like art directing this terrain. And I plug it into a wizard's node. So what the wizard's node is, you can just copy the settings I have right here. I find these to be the best settings to get you to a dune-esque, desert-esque feeling in the landscape. And then you can take this and plug it into a warp. This warp is super strong, super powerful, and it's going across the whole terrain. What you can use this warp for, also besides just warping the terrain, is to direct how many dunes you want in this one specific main landscape. If you're only making like one dune that's like huge and it goes throughout the whole like scene, you can crank the size up a lot, and then here you have like this really cool like deserty, this is like kind of like one dune with like some rocks here maybe, and then you can lower it down and then you get two. It just makes very interesting shapes. If you put it down really low, you have like a lot of dunes stacked on top of each other. So it really depends what you're going for, what you need for a specific scene. I found that like I think 0.25 was the setting that I used, and it worked the best for me. And then you also have strength here of like how much do you want it to warp. I think that if you're making dunes, one of the higher values will be much better and have much better results than if you're using like a lower value, because it won't warp the terrain enough and it won't make this dune sort of feeling. Then if we go one node forward, we go into thermal node. This thermal node is very minor, but I feel like it helps a lot into giving the like desert dune-y feel. It's because it takes all these sharp edges and all these sharp cracks in the terrain, if you can look at it right here, and it sort of smoothens them out. So it really has this adds this like extra smooth effect to the landscape, which I found to be more towards what I was looking for when making these dunes. You can also adjust it. You can make it the duration higher. You can make it lower. Just be careful, because if you put it too high, at the bottom, because it's a thermal node, it's making all the sediment go down, and then it's flattening it out. And this looks way less deserty than if you have it way lower. This looks way more dune-ish. Strength here also you can adjust. You can make the duration high, but the strength low. But again, the problem is that the lower surfaces become extremely fat, and we kind of want them more U-shaped in a way than flat. So that's why this is how you would want to have it set up. And then here I just have a height map export set to EXR, and a measure export set to FBX normal adapt with 4096 vertices. I just find these settings to be the best for performance, and quality wise, you're getting a really good quality for really good performance, especially if you're working in Cinema 4D with something like this, or like Unreal Engine. Height map. And then here I have a seamless node. What a seamless node does is that it makes the terrain basically tileable. So you can take any terrain you have, add a seamless node, and it will try and generate a tileable version of the terrain. This might not always work the way you want it to, but for a case like this where the terrain is very flat and has like a lot of repeating patterns, I found that it worked very well, especially for my use case, which was using it in the midground to background aspects, just for filling up the landscape. So yeah, this was the whole GAEA process. For my settings, expo settings, I hold terrain and 8K resolution. If you have a higher version of GAEA, like a higher pricing point of GAEA, you can use 16K, 24K. I don't think these are worth exporting above that. 16K, and I could see there might be worth it, but 8K in general will be completely fine. And that's it for GAEA. Now we're gonna jump into Cinema 4D. So here in Cinema 4D, I have the scene that I made, and I'm just gonna be going over some of the stuff and how I scattered stuff, and some of the materials and everything that I used to make the scene, and what makes it, work, in my opinion, at least. For reference, there is one HDR, the HDRI being used, and it's not being used to light the scene, but it's being used as the background. So here you can see I have an HDR set to visible, and if I turn this off, the HDRI is gone. So turn this back off, back on. And then for the light, I have a basically sun lamp. I have the Octane daylight, and this is the only light in the scene, and it's lighting the whole scene. If I turn it off, it is unlit, and it is basically doing all the heavy lifting in terms of visual lighting. These are the settings, nothing too special, just tweak them until I got the right color and the right lighting amount for the aesthetic that I was going for. Then above we have effectors. Effectors, these are basically noise textures that are being used as masks for scattering all of these objects. Just a lot of them, because you want to have layering in your masks for scattering. To explain this, in nature, stuff isn't just one. Usually you would scatter something with a noise map, with a noise set as a mask, but in nature, it's a bit more complicated than that. And if you want to achieve that extra randomness in things, you should use different noises and layer them on top of each other. And then you'll get a way more natural look in the whole environment. Because if we, for instance, go here, and if we go to the palms, let's just take the palms, for instance. Here you can see all the effectors that are currently on these palms. And if I turn one of these effectors off, you see, you get more of them here in the background. And if I turn one more off, you get them here as well. And if I turn one more off, they're there, and one more off. And so if you have more noises and you're layering them on top of each other, you will get a more natural and a more art-directed look to your scenes. This is used for everything. If I go here and if I go to the fern plant, these plants here, if I start, and here you can see I art-directed it way more, like fine-tuning the specific noise maps and how much they're affecting the actual scattering. If I turn this off, you can see it here maybe better than on the scene. They will start appearing in more and more places. Yeah, getting more thicker here. And then if I turn this one, which is like the main one, you can see that they go all the way into the bottom of the landscape. And this is just the power of using multiple noises when you're working on landscapes like this. They really add like this randomness and the sense of like stuff being clumped together and then not being clumped together anymore and then clumped together again. And it makes it way more natural than if you're just using one noise for every single thing you're scattering in the scene. Okay, we're back. Cinema 4D randomly crashed. Happens. Let's keep going. So where we left off, if we turn off all the foliage here and all the scattering, and let's look at the material used on this landscape. So this hero landscape is using one material here, and it is basically a texture from Quixel Megascans that is then the albedo I took, and I color corrected it 1, 2, 3 times, and I used the color corrected versions of the albedo to then make different, to then combine them all together with different masks. So here I used generators to make the masks, and then make this very like, if you look at the landscape here, it is not just one color, but you can see there is like a brighter spot here, there is a darker spot here, and also here you can see it, I feel like the best, where there's this bright sand color, and then this like more darkish, purplish tinted color. And this makes the landscape just more interesting and more believable to look at, because if you look at the desert, it is mostly not just one color, but like sometimes the color varies in the sand grain. So this makes it so the whole landscape is a bit more believable. How I did this, again, take the texture, the Quixel Megascans textures, take the albedo, color correct it a bit, and then take masks. So here I used the generators to make the masks, but you can use any way to make these masks you want. You can make it with GAEA, you can make it with Photoshop if you want to paint them onto the terrain, since this is a height map, whichever way you really want. Here you can see I'm using a dirt generator, and this dirt generator I'm then using as a mask for the mixed texture, and then this mixed texture is combining the two color corrected textures together and making the variation in the landscape. And I'm doing this 3 times, once with a curvature texture generator, once with a dirt, and once with a fall-off map. And this makes the landscape just way more varied and way more interesting to look at. Another thing I'm doing with the material, if you're making a landscape like this, so a desert landscape, I am using the displacement from the Quixel Megascans texture, and I am mixing it with a noise texture that I am then mixing those two with another noise texture that has a chaos node attached to it. For those of you that don't use Cinema 4D, chaos just makes it so the texture or whatever you're feeding into it, it like breaks up the tiles of it. So if you're using a tiled texture, this will break it up and make it as seamless as possible. I'm using this for the noise just because it makes it a bit more interesting. I found out I was trying to make it a bit more interesting at the instead of playing with these settings here, but just using a chaos node. But that's not that important. You could just use 2 noise nodes here and mix them together. But anyway, what this does, I'm putting it into the bump map, and I'm adjusting the bump. And then this gives the landscape this grainy feel. If we zoom in here, you can see that it is very grainy. Now, if you look at it from a distance, it becomes way less apparent that it is like grainy here. But even if you're not looking directly at it, your brain is noticing that this is not smooth, but it is like a bit rugged. And this ruggedness is what gives the impression that this is, a more of a desert than it is, I don't know, something else, more like dirt or something like that. And again, you would think that this doesn't impact the scene a lot, but it actually helps a lot when making something like this. So I really wouldn't skip it, especially if you're making desert scenes. It helps a lot for the realistic part of it. So that is the texture. I'm using a different texture for the background elements, but that's just because if they were all the same color and the texture, if they're all the same color, it would look a bit weird. And also the texture that I made for the foreground element doesn't really work on the background elements because they're a bit smaller in size, and the texture generates the curvature map, and the dirt map is generated a bit weirdly on them. But if we actually look at them, let me go here real quick. If we actually look at them, here you can see that they're a different color, similar, but like just a bit more darker. And here I'm using in the background, I'm using the same hero landscape I'm using in the foreground, just made a bit bigger and tiled in a way to where if you look at it from the right angle, it looks like, so this is like a sea of dunes that keeps going for like a longer period, for like a long time. And then I'm using the seamless texture that I got from GAEA, and I'm tiling it with a cloner, and I'm moving it at an angle. This is not straight towards the camera, but it is tilted a bit. If you look at the camera here, you can see that it is a bit tilted, and this makes it so that if you look at it, you don't get immediately the impression that this is like a tileable thing. There is no repetition you're seeing. If we can see it even more, if we go here and we turn off the fog, you can see that it's not exactly apparent if you look at it from this angle. If you look at it from really close up, yeah, you can see that it's tiled. 100% you can see that it's tiled. But if you're looking at it from afar, you wouldn't really be able to tell, and that's kind of the whole point. That on top of the volumetric fog, and it's almost unnoticeable that there is like a tileable landscape here. It is not working, the fog. There you go. My bad. So yeah, that's how that's done. That's how the whole background is done. If you want to see how the mountains in the back are done, it is literally just a Cinema 4D landscape that I have taken and I have extended out and like squished and then used as mountains in the background, because these mountains are so far back you can't see anything about them except the color maybe and the shape. And what we want is the shape, because the shape makes it so the viewer can see that in the horizon, in the distant horizon, there are these mountains. So there is an end to this desert, right? So this is what these landscapes here are used for. And you can make this in any software. You can make them in Blender with the Blender landscape add-on. It's literally just take a landscape, squish it, and use it as mountains because they're so far back, it doesn't matter. And then for the last thing I want to talk about is the volumetric fog. In my experience, Octane has not the best volumetric fog, you can say. I don't really like how Octane does it, how much performance it takes, and the result you get from that performance, especially for landscapes like this where they're super large. So what I tend to do is I use the Octane. If we go into the post-processing, there is a fog option. This is relatively new to Octane, but what you can do is you can take it on and then Octane will self-generate the fog as like a mask on top of the render. And this fog you can adjust here with these settings here, so you can decide how close you want it to be, how far you want it to be, how high the fog should go. So if I turn it to like 200 here, you can see the fog raises up. If I turn it to 500, you can see it even more. The fog is all the way up here, but we don't want it that high. We want it like at 150, so you can see the edge stops somewhere there. And then here also the color, you can adjust the color if you want it to be white. This also looks very nice if you want it to be a bit blue, to more of like a cold tone. So it's whatever you feel like. This is you have a lot of free reign to art direct. This post-processing fog is as good as using Blender volumetrics and using like a cube with a volumetric scatter inside of it. No, it's not. That's still better. But in terms of Octane, if you're working with an Octane, this is really useful, and I just find it way more convenient than the Octane built-in fog volume. And that is, I think, it of what I wanted to talk about. Hope someone found this video useful. Hope you took something from it, and hopefully I'll be able to show you guys some more projects and help you out. If you have any questions that you want to ask, please write them in the comments. So yeah, that's it. Bye bye guys.